My name's Mark Tashin. I'm the headmaster at Burton Academy. And what we're doing this late afternoon is talking about and presenting to you the Rowland Project. By way of quick background, let me get used to this. For those of you who don't know Barry and Wendy Rowland, they are, by any and all measure, extraordinary and extraordinarily generous benefactors of this school. A little more than a year ago, they committed a $20 million donation so we could take some steps that we find unbelievably exciting, and I hope you do as well. And that's part of what I want to talk through. This is an oil painting that was done by Oscar Trugler before Barry passed away. Barry passed away last June. But we had this oil painting done of the two of them, and the commitment, my promise to them was that this painting will hang in the new building. So tonight, what we're going to do is talk about I'm going to start with a little bit of a discussion of 21st century education and what that actually means. And I will use that as a framework for getting to design parameters for a new building. And then I'm going to turn it over to our design architect, Kyle Murphy. So first, let me give you a little bit of an introduction. And it starts with a historical perspective. I love this slide of Burton. It was taken in the late 1800s. And one of the things I find amazing about it is that our signature building looks remarkably similar. It almost looks identical. Everything else has changed around it, but that building, built in 1820, or the school was founded in 1829, that building was the symbol of the school, and today in 2019, it continues to be the symbol of this school. That's what it looks like, not today because there's snow on the ground, but this was a recent photograph, and as you can see, it continues to be just a magnificent place of learning. Burton's mission is to educate students intellectually and morally for a life of responsibility, integrity, and service. And I wanted to share that with you because that's what we think about and what we try to accomplish every day. The first bullet point is incredibly important as we think about 21st century education. We think about, we develop these core values in a collaborative effort with our entire faculty and staff. Number one is we value engaging, vigorous educational experiences in academics, athletics, and the arts. Those words are really important. Engaging is an important word because oftentimes you hear about schools talk about instruction, or you talk about teaching, or professing, and it always feels like the teacher's there giving knowledge and the students are there receiving knowledge. We want our education to be engaging. What that means is that every person in the room is responsible for contributing to that education. And we want it to be vigorous, and the word vigorous is important to us because when you think about it, the idea is that at the end of a really good class period, you should feel better. You should feel energized, not exhausted. And if you think about it, for those of you who like to exercise, usually you feel better at the end of a workout than you do at the beginning. You don't feel tired and exhausted. You feel satisfied, you feel reinvigorated. And that's at least a goal or an ideal for how we want education to be. And educational experiences was intentional. So we didn't say engaging vigorous teaching or engaging vigorous education. We value engaging vigorous educational experiences. And when you think about an experience, that's very different from just learning something. So we try to have our teachers create learning experiences for our students. Another piece of our mission that's absolutely critical is that we are here to serve communities. And we have 13 sending towns, and we accept students from outside sending towns as well. And our whole purpose is to serve the public, to serve communities. So our doors are open, and we welcome every student. We have a full range of special education services. And so when you talk about a word that's used nowadays fairly regularly, the word inclusion, we have been inclusive since 1829. And we're a rarity in that we're an independent school that has its doors open. It's part of what I love about this school. So here's what 21st education means to us here at Burton. What we want to do is use brain-based principles of learning design to design these educational experiences. And this work has been ongoing for, I'd say, the past 5 to 7 years. We've been working with our faculty on what that means. Number one, the brain, and this is all, a lot of this is actually common sense, but I want to put it up here because when we think about future education, it should feel familiar. So number one, what we know is that the brain is activated as much by relationships as by intellect. And so we always want our human relationships to be at the center of a Burton education. What we know is that giving a sense of purpose to the learning activates motivation and activates different areas of the brain. We know that authentic integrated learning experiences are more powerful and more memorable than kind of abstract, separate learning that doesn't connect with other disciplines. So we're looking for ways to create more integrative experiences. We know that when you ask students, or ask anyone, quite frankly, to demonstrate their learning, it increases the learning. It embeds the learning. And we've developed this thing we're calling the BBA Spires. We want students to graduate from Burton with proficiency or strength in communication, in problem solving, in integrative thinking, and in citizenship. So those are 4 areas that we're now thinking about as we shape the future of our education. The reason I share these is in part because when we first started conceiving of a new building, one of the things that drove it was the notion or the question, what if we could design a building that supported the kind of education that we envision in the future? And that's what got us really excited about a new building. It wasn't just, oh, let's build a new building and let's put some classrooms in it and make them just like everything else. Rather, we had the proposition to build what we thought would be the first 21st century classroom building at Burton, arguably the first 21st century classroom building in this state. It's a building that thought differently about architecture because we're thinking differently about education. So, what does that mean? We're trying to design a building, in case you don't recognize this is Mr. Rogers. And I said some of this should look familiar. So, Mr. Rogers, remember the Won't You Be My Neighbor? We're trying to create learning neighborhoods throughout this school. And the concept of learning neighborhood is something new to us. Rather than thinking about a class and a classroom, oh, this is the math classroom. We want to think about our classrooms as neighborhoods, or a group of classrooms as neighborhoods. And in fact, a group of learning spaces create a neighborhood. And in those neighborhoods, you can then foster that kind of cross-disciplinary thinking that I was talking about, that we think is part of 21st century education. So we're building a new building. Right now, all our buildings are full. And so there's no room to move. But the proposition is that if we create a new building, we can take pieces out of each one of our existing buildings and create an integrative neighborhood in that new building. What else that does is it allows us now to start moving other pieces around in the school, because right now, as I said, we're full, and it's hard for anything to move. It's sort of like a tray of ice cubes that are frozen, and there's no room for anything to move. But as soon as we have a new building, we can start putting different programs into that new building, the right programs into that building, and then we can fill in the spaces with other programs and create multiple neighborhoods. And that's what's going on here. So our new building, and our architect, Kyle Murphy, will get into this more, but our new building is English, social studies, really arts or STEAM, science, technology, education, arts, and mathematics. So a STEAM lab, and a common space that's going to be a library. You'll see all of that. But we also can then turn our Smith Center into a SREM center, science, robotics, engineering, and math. We have to figure out the Riley Center and the gym and how we create the neighborhood here. We have the seminary building, and some of the seminary building will be accessible, so how do we create a learning neighborhood there? How do we create a learning neighborhood with the Rowland building? And so on and so forth. So my simple message here that we're not just designing a new building. What we're getting to do is redesign this entire campus and reconfigure it so that it better supports education in every area of this school. So here's our campus right now, and just to orient you, here's Seminary Avenue. We're all sitting right here in the Riley Center. You go up and there's a circle, and you come around here, and if, for those of you who've been here before, this is our back parking lot. There's the seminary building, bell tower's right about there. And right now we have this back parking lot, and a maintenance shed is right there. So that's the Burton of today. And post Rowland Project, what we're gonna have, again, drive up Seminary, this entire parking area we're turning into courtyard. And as you'll see, we have a really interesting new building designed here. We'll take what was the maintenance shed there, and we're gonna move it over to there. And then, as you know, this was a parking lot, and so this was our faculty parking lot, and we're moving our faculty parking down to this area and building an extension of the parking from what is currently the parking lot in our access program right there, and it'll go up and connect with the parking lot up here behind the gymnasium and along the Rowland Center, right where we are. So there's your before and after. And I want to very quickly get to the building. So we developed a series of instructions for our architect. Number one was to build a building that looks to the future while paying homage to the rich history of Burton Academy. What we wanted was a building that looked different, that felt different, and that thinks differently about education. But we wanted to honor the past. Just as we're moving into the future, yet we still constantly think about the traditions of this school. We wanted a building that fits uniquely into this setting. And what we learned, we built the Mountain Campus now 8 years ago, and that was our first place-based building. And we found we love the notion of place-based architecture. Place-based architecture says that you design a building that really only works in the place it's designed for. So you don't just take a building and chunk it down anywhere. It's built specifically for that space. The third is we wanted a courtyard that enhances the community experience and allows multiple buildings to connect and relate to each other in interesting ways. So if you think about that courtyard, we have a new building, we have the seminary building, we have the Rowland Center, we have the Smith Center, and rather than just put a patch of grass in the middle and say, let's call it a quad, we wanted that courtyard to also be designed as a way of connecting and creating community. And last, we wanted to build a building that's constructed with strong consideration for economic and environmental sustainability. And I think you have to connect the two. We want to make sure we can continue to be a school that's affordable to our community, and we want a building that showcases our care for the climate and for the environment. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kyle. And before I do, I want to just give you a brief introduction on Kyle. So We went through a pretty intensive interview process when we were looking to select an architect. We had arguably the most well-known independent school architect in the country as one of our bidders. And we had worked with them and we thought very highly of him. And we were talking with a number of other architecture firms as well. We were not talking to Kyle Murphy, by the way. I didn't call him up. But in the process, Kyle sent a proposal, unsolicited, that shared some thinking on what we should be thinking about for this new building. And when I tell you that without having seen what we were looking for, he spoke to exactly what we hoped to create in the building. And he showed a vision and an understanding that was extraordinary. Kyle graduated from Burton in 2007. That sounds very recent to a lot of you. It sounded very recent to me. And we were kind of at first scratching our head going, is he old enough? Is he ready? Right? And he was taught by a lot of our faculty members. And then for those of you in the audience who are thinking 28, 29 years old, think about what you were doing at 28 or 29. He's a grown-up. He's extremely motivated. He demonstrated his talent, and he demonstrated a deep love for and understanding of this community. And so when we went through the process, it became very clear that we were delighted to have Kyle in the mix. And even more so, having worked with him now for the last 7-8 months, I can't tell you how interesting it has been to have Kyle involved in this project. He brought with him a partner firm, and the firm is called ZGF. And if you are in architecture circles, you've heard of them, and if you haven't, I hadn't heard of them, but I'm not in that world. ZGF is a global firm with 600 architects, and they've done an unbelievable number of high-end, high-design projects. So Kyle is a design architect, and he brought ZGF as a partner firm as the architect of record. What they've really done is formed a design team that's kind of extraordinary. My great fear with ZGF was that we'd be too small and irrelevant. And I said that to them, and I have to tell you, and again, now working with them for the last 7 or 8 months, they've fulfilled every bit of the promise that our little project, and to them it's a small project, let's face it, our little project would be treated with the importance that we treat it. Because this is, as we know, this is the most important project we have. And I would argue that each one of our projects becomes the most important project we've ever done. This one is really important. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to have a design team that is showing this kind of commitment to what we're doing. And to give you a quick idea of how well regarded ZGF is, they were just selected by Amazon to design HQ2, their 2 million square foot headquarters. And as Seth Bongartz, the chair of the board, said, Amazon needs to know they're the second most important project at ZGF. So with that, I want to turn this over to Kyle Murphy, Burton alum, native son, and an extraordinary architect. Kyle, come on up.
Okay, thank you so much. So I have to be on my best behavior tonight because my parents just walked in, so they told me, they're like, we never thought we'd see you in the Raleigh Center again. So I do want to express my appreciation to the rest of the design team that we have here tonight. I can't really see who anyone is, but Tim and Jesse from ZGF are here, and we also have Adam and Rafe from SE Group. And we have Parker, who is a rising senior at Burton, and Parker actually just came down to DC to work with us for the past couple of weeks. And thankfully, I don't think we scared him away from becoming an architect, but it's really been a great collaborative process doing this project, and it really could not be more of an honor to do this. It's kept me up at night in a healthy way, I guess you could say. So as we dive in, I just want to, as kind of a primer to sort of contextualize some of the bigger conversations we want to have about this project, I want to share a couple of ongoing initiatives that we have around the world. And I think the bigger thing that we're trying to speak to here is that we're always trying to sort of identify what our greatest limitations are in a project and really use them and embrace them to to create the vision. You know, it's not something that has to hold us back, but really it can be something that we really celebrate in the project. So I'm going to go through these quickly, and then I want to get back to what we're doing here on campus. But this is a project we're doing in Mexico, which is a new community center and a health clinic. And the stipulation that was given to us is that we're basically in an affordable housing community that's all single-story buildings. And it was very important that we get above the height of those buildings to have views of the mountain in the distance. But the problem is that because it's a flat site, we basically need to get creative about how we deal with accessibility because we don't have money for an elevator in this project. So the client was looking for some sort of departure from the vernacular of this community, and we said instead of making sort of a box building with a terrible ramp that's coming off of it, let's turn the whole building and the site into basically a journey where it's sort of like a figure eight that when it flips on itself, that comes up, and that's what's actually forming the building, and we're sort of uniting the landscape with the building then. So now the whole building is informed by this single gesture, and what this means is that, you know, somebody who is mobility impaired can have the same experience of using the building as, you know, anyone who's not. So by celebrating that what would seem as a limitation of the ramp, we've actually used that to inform the whole project. So as you move around, you sort of get different interpretations of, you know, what the profile of the building is, and then, you know, there's more public spaces around it. There's some private spaces. You're able to come up around the outside of the building where there's different terraces with playground equipment. From the top, we have these really majestic views of the mountain, and then we try to celebrate that on the interior wherever we can. So, but it's all informed by that single gesture, and it's all informed by that one idea that we didn't want to be held back by the issue of accessibility, but rather we wanted to embrace that as the underlying idea of the project. In Peru, we were asked to do a school as sort of a tear down and rebuild, and I should say a lot of these are proposals now. We're trying to get these built, still very early in the process on them, but same issue that we had this, we're going to have an empty site, and we said instead of, because again we don't have money for an elevator, so instead of limiting people to where they can be, let's take a ramp that, and we can do this at ADA, and wrap it around the perimeter, and then inside, if we think of the classrooms as basically being these sort of stacked Legos, so that inside the building it's sort of this ascension that happens. So, you know, quite literally a student can look up to the next level and sort of aspire to be at that when they finish. So you sort of grow up from preschool through primary to secondary school, and then there's a roof park on the top. So the outside, we're not really trying to make much of a statement, but then as you come in, it opens up onto this atrium where we would have natural light that would be pouring in, and it's almost like this cavernous kind of moment. And all of the classrooms would have a direct view onto this sort of epicenter of the school. And then there would be a roof park. So, but again, the ramp is something that we've embraced in this, that there could be artwork displayed along it as you move through, so it's more of a journey that everybody takes and it's celebrated rather than just some, you know, crappy ramp that some people are consolidated to. So in the Dominican, we were asked to do a building that will house a school and a health clinic and a vocational center, so we're bringing together 3 different programs in a community that's really having a tough time. This is some of the worst conditions I've seen in any of these countries, and this is the existing school. There's a local woman who founded this school about 10 years ago, and this is one of the classrooms. So, you know, it's about a 300 square foot classroom that they have 25 students packed into. So we did community engagement work where we kind of determined what they were looking for in the new project. Excuse me, and we've proposed 2 buildings that will bring together these programs for this region. So the idea is that, you know, the school had asked us, we don't really want to be drawing a lot of attention to ourselves from the streets, so we simply varied the treatment of the stone on the outside to the inside, where it starts as this sort of orthogonal treatment on the outside, and then it blends, when you get to the main entrance, it blends into this sort of organic treatment, almost like the entrance of a cave. And then on the inside, it opens up onto this world where you have all of these, you know, fun little steps that students can be on. This can be a gathering place for the school, it can be a gathering place for the community. And then again, we have the ramp that wraps up around this, so we're once again embracing, pretty much in all these projects, we never had money for an elevator, so we always need to be creative about how we integrate a ramp. So this would be that central gathering space, and then This is bringing together a vocational center for people of any age really to be honing their skills, and then there'll be nutritional programs hosted here. This will be a library and a media center. There'll be a full health clinic in the building, and then there'll also be 12 classrooms. So we're really trying to use architecture to address many needs in this region, as opposed to just building a school and not responding to other things that are going on. And then lastly, another project in Peru. We were asked to do a school. This is a school actually that will house about 700 students, so it's roughly the size of the Burton population. And there's this sort of awkward triangular plot of land where when we started talking with the school, they had noted, why not do sort of this block of classrooms around the outside? And we had said to them, you can do that, but that forms sort of this awkward courtyard in the center. So instead, we can be looking to the region to be informing this design. If you've been to Peru, you've probably seen these terraces that are all over the country, and then the idea of sort of the courtyard space with porosity. So instead of building that perimeter around the outside, we build up, it's almost like a stadium of classrooms where we have a flat facade that's on the outside of the building, and then on the inside it's this totally different treatment that you would have to enter in order to have that unfold. And then we start to cut out views to the mountains, and we'd have green roof that would be wrapping that. We break the masses radially to allow natural ventilation and circulation. And then we cover the whole thing with a giant space frame, which would have a special fabric in it, because there's a very high UV index in this region, so we have to protect the students from the sun. So the school had asked, we actually want this project to be as boring as possible from the street, but then you become compressed as you come in, and you're always oriented towards the light, and then when you enter, it would unfold into this totally different world that we really are not trying to hint too much from the street. We've internally to our team and with Mark and others, we've talked about with the Rowland Project that we're always looking for these sort of awe-inspiring moments that we can create in architecture. They don't necessarily have to be huge, but something that will uplift the students. And like I'm thinking of when I was here, what were my motivations to come to school? And I think as we start talking about the programs that go into this project, Mark has talked about project-based learning and integrative learning, and was it last year the slogan was "Take Ownership"? Was that what 2 years ago?
Yeah.
But I think when I think about, when I was here, I worked closely with Betsy Hubner and Neil Freeburn on arts-related projects, and I think when I would wake up, I was always excited to come to school because I knew that I could continue with there was an ownership that I felt for the projects I was working on, and I think. In many ways, that has become kind of the thesis for this new project, the Rowland Project, as we begin thinking what we can do on this campus. So it's kind of funny that we ended up showing the same photo, but so just to give some visualization for the programs that Mark was talking about that we'll be moving, we're going to be taking the library in its totality from the Smith Center and the STEAM Center in the basement of the seminary building. And then we'll have the humanities, at least most of the humanities, between the seminary annex and the third floor of the seminary building that will be collectively moved to this new site, which will obviously free up space in these existing buildings, but also give us a chance to really embrace this idea of integrative learning and project-based learning as sort of the foundation pedagogically of what the school wants to accomplish. So there are a couple of views that I think have been really driving our thinking on the way that this building is going to, the presence that this building is going to have on the site. One is when we are basically coming around the back of the Smith Center, because this will be the first moment that by car you'll be able to see the building. You won't be able to see it much from the street. But just as a reference, I think everyone's pretty familiar with the campus here, but this would be the view coming up behind that. We have the view from the courtyard looking up to Mount Equinox, which I think now, we kind of take for granted. It's like that's just a parking lot, but that's going to end up becoming a beautiful courtyard space. Adam and Rafe have been great to work with on this. And then we have the view from the top of the hill where graduation is held the past few years, I guess. When I was here, it was held on where the turf field is now. So, but that view from the corner looking to the bell tower with the mountains behind it is really something that we want to be embracing in this project. And I think so much of what architecture is about is just getting people to kind of look at what's already there, but maybe present it to them in a way that maybe they haven't appreciated that view before. So to give some visualization to the idea of the neighborhood that Mark was speaking to, we were basically reorganizing. If you think of sort of the conventional hallway with classrooms on it, we're taking more or less that same square footage and we're rethinking that amount of space into the idea of a neighborhood or a pod, if you will, where you have, in pink, you'd have the 3 learning spaces, and then you would have a sort of commons that these spaces would open up onto, so that, because right now, like when I take a walk in the seminary annex, I've been on campus many days when class is in session, and you have students who are out in the hallway working on group assignments. They might be rehearsing something. So we said if we could sort of take that amount of square footage and turn that into more of a hub that people want to be in, that way a class could be hosted. There could be a big garage door that's between the blue space and one of the pink spaces to allow for a larger class to get together and then break out. So it's just sort of a different, it's kind of a paradigm shift in what this interior layout of a sort of a conventional classroom relationship can be. So that's sort of on one end, and then I think as it pertains to the heart of what this building will be, because the library is moving, we wanted to get creative about the idea of what does the next generation of library mean. So we don't want to be thinking of library as just sort of a very siloed thing where you have one room for books and one room for computers and tables, but instead we can be creating this very kind of multifaceted space. Where you've probably been to many universities where they have, sort of the monumental stair that's connecting different levels, and we could be thinking about that, but with, I guess I can point here, platforms for students to be working on, and then there would be books that would be flanking these. There would be breakout spaces for students to work in, but then this whole thing could be used as a presentation space. So if there was a guest speaker that came in, or if a student had a presentation they wanted to share. But it's really just about taking these 3 sort of distinct ingredients and bringing them together in one really beautiful moment in the center of the building. So when we bring these 2 ideas together, we end up with sort of the central, I guess you could call it like a gathering space that's flanked by 2 of these neighborhoods, and then we can start to terrace back from that. So on the second level, we would have 2 more neighborhoods break off, and we can keep, sort of creating this journey up through the building that at every level you have neighborhoods that are branching off of this central space. So as we begin to populate the site, I guess there's sort of 2 ways of thinking about this. One is, as we're looking at here, which is, or a moment ago, which is sort of inside out, but then thinking outside in, we also want to be thinking about what is sort of the general massing of the building want to feel like on the site. So when we had started this conversation, one thing that we had talked about is it would be kind of a tragedy to put just another block building at the bottom of this hill, because first of all, we should be willing to depart a little bit from the vernacular on campus to reflect the new pedagogical things that the school's trying to do. But then also, just so functionally thinking about classes that are on the back of the building, they'll be looking basically at a hill. So instead of doing a block building with sort of a traditional quad at the bottom that you might find at a university, we can take more or less that same square footage and begin to integrate the building into the landscape more, so that it really feels like sort of part of the landscape instead of this abstract object that's been dropped onto campus. So we start with sort of 3 levels that will move, and I should say the way that these work is that the bottom level would open up onto this new space down here, and then the top level would open up directly onto the field. So the way that the topography is it actually works really well that we can get 2 full levels before we pretty comfortably arrive at where the athletic field is at the top right now. So, and then we shift one of those masses over, because if we were to keep that there, we would end up blocking a lot of the view from Equinox from the courtyard, and as I noted, that's something that, we don't want to be really disrupting any of these beautiful views that we have on campus. And then we turn that mass so that we actually would place the mass directly on axis with the bell tower on one side, these rooms would have a direct view to the bell tower with the mountains behind it, and then at this other side, when you come up through that stair, you would have a view directly to Mount Equinox from the top, but then you're also not blocking Equinox from the courtyard here, and then this would create a roof terrace that you would be able to access from the inside of this building. So, and then because, you know, because the actual profile of the mountain is a little bit offset right now, we realized that if we actually morphed the shape of the roof on the top so that, you know, basically the back end of this is sort of mirroring that profile of the mountain, that would orient your view as you come up through this much better to the top of the mountain, and we end up with this kind of cool geometric form on the top of the building. But I think it's important to note that these forms are not arbitrarily derived. These are just a product of us trying to capture what is really the heart and soul of where Burton is. So as we think about this idea of the sort of the inside out, populating the outside in now, within that 3-story volume is where we would have that grand atrium stair gathering space that would exist within where this mass basically interlocks with the 2 masses below, and that would form that journey up to the hill, to the top, to where you'd have that view to Equinox. And then what's driving a lot of the landscape design is this idea that we can take that same gesture and we can actually pull it back down into the landscape to create kind of a thoroughfare here that would connect directly to where the back entrance to the seminary building is. So you'd be able to come out of the back of the seminary building and be directly on access with the main entrance of this building that leads up to the mountain. And then we begin to populate the academic spaces around this. So the blue is meant to represent those neighborhoods that would be flanking this gathering space, and we would basically stack that up the hill now. So we're always trying to create this sort of terracing effect up the hill. And then at the top we would have, we're calling this the bell tower room because this is directly on access with the bell tower and the mountains behind. And we'll highlight this a little bit more, but this is, we're seeing this as, we've talked about sort of a place for elevated learning, elevated experiences, because this will be the highest place of learning on the campus. And we've seen, you know, capstone type presentations and other special events that could go on in that space. So, you know, I think that at least what's becoming very special about this project, for me where it is that the whole thing is basically driven by these 2 very simple gestures. It's just one curve that's sort of embracing people as you come in, as in the pink, and then the blue is this other curve that's interlocking that's highlighting the 2 most beautiful views on campus. So I'll go through these slowly, but this is where we would be. So this is that main thoroughfare that would be coming off of the back of the seminary building that would be leading us to the main entrance of this building. The whole thing would be stepping back up into the hill. We've been showing that the bottom 2 levels of the building are expressed with the natural slate, and that's partially because we want that part of the building really to feel like it's coming out of the landscape. And then the top is a standing seam metal panel, which will basically be forming, it's almost like a bridge that's connecting back into the hill. And then there'll be a rooftop terrace here that will open up from the top of that mess. So I do think it's important to note that we really will not see this building much from the street. So I think, not that we would want to hide it, but I think the idea of the sort of delayed sense of arrival is something that could be very neat about this, that you sort of get glimpses of this space through the trees, at least in the winter when the leaves aren't there, and then it's like as you come up this path or as you work your way around the building, if you're arriving by car, that's when the building would finally open up to you. And you would arrive to this view. So this is basically coming out of the seminary annex as we're next to the drop-off area. And there will be some parking that will remain here, some handicap and visitor parking. And then you'll be oriented down this path to where the main entrance of the building is. So that whole gesture is inside of this, the idea of that gathering space, and then these neighborhoods sort of flank off of it. This would be coming out of the back of the seminary building. So one other thing that's very cool about what we're doing here is that we are planning to get some of the blocks from the Dorset Quarry to be able to use as kind of benches and other site elements around this courtyard. And we all feel that, just there's sort of a beautiful tie to the very, the rich history from that quarry and of the area too that we can be embracing in this. So I do want to break down the interior a little bit because I think as we think about the way that this is laid out, it's important to understand how that idea of the neighborhood that Mark was talking about is actually manifesting itself in the project. But this would be that main entrance on the ground level when you walk in to where that grand stair would begin. And then to the left here, this is one of the neighborhoods. We have 4 learning spaces and a learning commons. So this would be a big garage door that would open up between one of the learning spaces and the learning commons that would allow, if there was a sort of 2 or 3 classes that wanted to get together in this space, they could do that. And then otherwise, teachers can still use these rooms as more traditional classrooms if they want to do it, or it enables them to have 3 or 4 teachers working collaboratively in this space, as opposed to, classrooms on a hallway. And then over here, we will have the STEAM Center, which STEAM as in, maker space. It's kind of like woodshop light. I'm thinking of almost like being in an architecture studio. So we'll have, 3D printers and laser cam and model building and access to technology, and that will sort of form this tech suite that will also flank this main space in the center here. So moving up a level then, we continue up that grand stair towards the mountain, and we would break off and we would have 2 more neighborhoods on the second level here, 1 on each side. And there would be a teacher collaboration room in the center that would have a view directly inside of this space, but then also have a view directly to the plaza. So we've tried to be very conscious about where people's homes are going to be within this new project. And then in the back, this is where a lot of the service stuff will be, bathrooms and mechanical and whatnot. So standing at the bottom of this stair, looking up to Mount Equinox, if we were to basically cut away half of the building, this is what we would see. We would have the library that's forming, it's like a journey that's coming up the hill. And you would have books that's flanking it, you would have breakout spaces, there would be platforms for students to be working in, in groups, and then this could also be used as a grand presentation space as well. So we are trying to hold on to the idea of putting as much wood in the space as we can. We're planning on using a timber structure for this, and that's been something that's been very important to the design team from the beginning of the project. So we see it as a chance to really embrace and celebrate the exposed structure on the inside instead of covering it up. Moving up onto the 3rd level now, so this would come up and you would have your view at the top here, and then you would branch off into a connection which would have some study spaces and gathering spaces, and this would lead out onto what I refer to as the bell tower room. So this is that room that is directly on axis with the bell tower of the seminary building. And that would be the view. So this could be used for a host of activities. We've talked about board meetings, students gathering in there. There could be events that are going on outside of school. Mark could be practicing his speeches in there. So then when you come out onto the roof terrace here, you would have a direct connection from the inside of this space out onto the roof terrace. And if there was ever some type of reception, I don't know if the gala is too big of an event to have up there, but it opens up a world of possibilities for, on a nicer day, for people to be kind of moving inside and outside. And this would be a space obviously overlooking the courtyard here, so you would have a view of the seminary building and then a view up to Equinox from the roof of the building here. But then there would be a connection back onto the top of the hill. And this would be the view looking the other way, so we're now at the top looking back towards the Green Mountains. And again, we've really tried to make an effort to use this top mass of the building to really create this very strong gesture. It's almost like there's a force towards the seminary building, as this is remaining the very dominant and central presence on the campus. And even though we're introducing an enormous new building on the campus, we still do want to be respectful of where we're coming from, but also looking to where we're going from the top of the building. And to contextualize this, this would be where the graduation would be held. So Mark had plenty of time to practice his speech, so now he's hosting graduation. But this would basically be, this is the backdrop for where graduation has been held, so that would be kind of the reference for where this exists right now. And then naturally, this also provides an opportunity to be hosting other events down in the courtyard. So, I'm thinking prism shows, I don't know, having one ensemble and then two ensembles, but the possibilities are endless to be able to have different types of events in this space. And we've really tried to create the idea of sort of intimate spaces around the courtyard, but then as a whole, it could collectively still be used as a larger performance space too if there was a special event. So I was planning to break down the plans a little more. I don't know if we need to get that far in detail, but just as a reference, I'll just quickly go through this. This is that main thoroughfare as you come in, and then this is that first neighborhood. So the blue is meant to represent that commons of the neighborhood that all the classrooms can break out onto. This is the STEAM center. This is all kind of service areas in the back. On level 2, we have 2 more of these neighborhoods and the teacher collaboration room in the middle that would have that central location in the building. And then on the top, I don't know what this is, but this would be that connection onto where the bell tower room is now that would be facing to the seminary building. So one thing that's kind of neat about that central space that we're creating is that it could be broken down into different zones where if you had different activities that were going on that would accommodate different numbers of people, but then as I mentioned, the whole thing could be combined into sort of one presentation space that could hold upwards of 100 people if there was a guest speaker that came in or if there were student presentations that wanted to be hosted there. So this is a little more detailed view of what that neighborhood would be, the idea of having flexible furniture out in that common space with presentation areas. These learning spaces would open up directly onto that. Again, this is that garage door that, we've talked about the space being very, very functional and not necessarily precious in the sense that if students wanted to be working on projects out here, that we want to be embracing the idea of project-based learning and integrative learning. And then I'll just go through these quickly, but through the neighborhoods, it's been important to us to create sort of a different character in each neighborhood so that different types of activities could go on there. So even based on the size, this is the largest one, so maybe that's more conducive to a couple of classes getting together. This is the common space of where the new STEAM lab will be. So we're really trying to create some diversity within these spaces. These are just simple plywood panels that are used to be hosting critiques and exhibitions. That's an example of that garage door that could be opening between spaces. Some of the flexible furniture. So some of these decisions have not been made yet as far as what the furniture will be in the space, but I think we've all just sort of embraced the idea of creating as much diversity between the neighborhoods as we can. So I'll just kind of round off with this, which is that it's really been coming up the past few days more so, this idea of elevated experiences that I was referring to, and I think we've talked about the idea of this building being very much an educational journey, and really, I mean, the whole campus, we're trying to celebrate the idea of an educational journey, but that this room is not just meant to be for the people in this building. This is meant to be sort of the highest point of learning for the entire campus. And we've discussed, could there be capstone type presentations, senior presentations? Is there some special moment that could be going on in here that students have a chance to look forward to for the 4 years that they're at school, but then also would form very special memories for them once they've left Burnburn? And I think we're still refining what that is, but we see a tremendous amount of opportunity in what this type of space can offer just based on where it is and what it's looking at. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Mr. and Mrs. Murphy, where are you?
They're hiding in the back.
How do you do? Very well. Good. So, a couple things I want to point out that I'm struck by. One is, and it was by intent, if you go back to those plans, if you think about the plans, there's almost no hallway. If you think about how much space is used up in a school or in any building by hallway, there's almost no hallway in this building because it's built in this way and was designed in this way where we have common space that's usable common space instead of a hallway loaded up. So that's one thing I really like. And the other, quite frankly, I've never seen a building like it. And I bet you haven't either. In part because it's fulfilling the promise of being designed expressly for this place. And so I hope you see both the look to the future because it, quite frankly, it is a modern looking building, but I also hope you see the homage to the past that was deeply designed into this building. I want to run through a few quick things. One is every time Kyle showed a view, including, I'm putting this one up, I'm struck by how ugly our parking lot is, right? So this is the before, and that's the after, and we're turning this parking lot into a beautiful, beautiful space of community and gathering. Kyle mentioned the Dorset Quarry. So Dick McDonough, who owns the quarry, he's agreed to donate marble, and when I tell you he has tons of marble, I mean, this guy has tons and tons of marble, quite literally, on his property. And here's a picture of the quarry if you haven't been there. It's one of the great places to swim in the world. There's another picture. There's a picture of what the quarry used to look like. And so what we have is an opportunity to turn this courtyard into a living history, not only of marble, but of the economy of this area. This photograph is from 1904. The quarry shut down before World War I. But when it was operating, it was deep, and you can see there are people there. Those are people, so that gives you some idea of the size and scale of marble. I've learned that marble this was all used to be ocean. And so marble is simply compressed seashells that have been fused together over geological time. And Vermont marble was used for the New York Public Library. So there's economic history, there's geological history, and there's cultural history embedded in what we can do with this marble and use it instead of furniture. We're going to be using this marble as a way of creating nooks and seating areas in the courtyard. Obviously, it's basically indestructible, which is nice. But even more so, it's just that much more connection to Vermont. If you go back to the architectural purpose statement, I mentioned sustainability, and I want to be specific here. Number one, we're designing the building with a tight envelope with optimized insulation and triple pane glass. Those are kind of the basics, like Sustainability 101. When I say optimized insulation, we're in the process of modeling the energy use of this building, so we're investing insulation dollars where they will have the highest impact. Rather, you don't just insulate everything. I mean, you could insulate to the nth degree if you had unlimited funds, but what we're trying to do is make sure we put every bit of insulation where it will have the highest impact. So that's the optimization. In terms of heating system, we have an air-to-water heat pump with optimization controls and electrical coils. What are optimization controls? This heating system is designed so that certain areas of the building become warmer, maybe because of solar gain. So if the sun's shining and it's heating up a room, it will take that heat and move it into a room that needs the heat. So it's moving our own heat around as well as generating heat. And then you need electric coils because these heat pumps, as some of you may know, become less efficient or even inefficient once you get down to 0 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees below zero. So you need some auxiliary heat going into them. We're looking at a thermal storage system for grid management, and we've been working with Efficiency Vermont and Green Mountain Power to be the first building in Vermont that has a system of thermal storage. What that is a way, what we would do is be heating water. We'd put in a pretty significant water tank, and we would heat the water during off-peak hours. Because what you want to do is, what Green Mountain Power wants to do is manage their peak rate, because you have to have enough capacity for peak. But rather than expand the peak through a new building, they would rather see us use the grid during off-peak hours, basically the middle of the night. The rates are also lower. So we would heat the water during the night, and then it distributes the heat during the day. We'll have LED lighting throughout, and this is a building that should be bringing in abundant natural light, and through the constant circulation of air, we want to constantly have fresh air. So I think we're hitting all the objectives, all the design objectives and the community objectives and the educational objectives. If we can turn the lights up a little bit, and I'm going to ask Kyle to come back up, we're happy to take questions. Maybe turn the lights up even more. So there we go. Thank you. So there we are. I guess I hope you like it. Any questions? Yeah, Kyle?
Talk about the exterior is going to be on the surface
good
of the
point.
exterior.
Yeah, so the first two levels is going to be, at least as we're showing now, a natural slate, and then the top level will be, we're looking at different types of metal panel that will kind of distinguish itself from the first two levels because it's bridging over to the back of the field. Yeah, and we've been conscious about selecting materials that are, I mean, some of it is economically driven, like we do have a budget that we have to design to, but a lot of it is also based on just the long-term durability of the materials. And slate lasts forever, it's minimal maintenance, and using any kind of masonry in that type of place would, at least we think, look very good because it almost feels like it's coming out of the mountain in a way. So that's been kind of the driver behind selecting
Are
that.
the existing stone on the other buildings? I mean, is it going to be radically different?
Well, so the existing buildings are limestone, and we're not planning on using limestone on this as we're showing it currently, but I think that's speaking to sort of a bigger sort of position that can be taken about how much something should fit in with the vernacular or not. And I think it's not that we've been intentionally looking to do something different just to do something different. I think it's just about embracing some of the local materials that are here and again, some of the long-term durability issues that drive that too.
I'll also point out that almost all of our buildings have slate roofs. And so that was one of the things we talked about, both the use of a natural material, the use of a local material. And when Kyle and the design team first came and said, we're thinking about slate, I spent a lot of time looking at our roofs and thinking about how that would translate to the side of the building. So it's not an alien material. It's not like copper or something but so we did see that connection, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Just from a practicality standpoint, it looked like it had a lot of flat roof surface. Am I right? And isn't that kind of silly to have in Vermont with heavy snow and heavy precipitation from a drainage and leakage, et cetera, standpoint?
So I mean, certainly the vernacular of Vermont is the pitched roof, but I think in this case, drainage will be internal on those roofs, so it's just a different approach to draining water off the top, and then the structural engineers designing to obviously take the snow loads in addition to the live and the dead loads. So it is a somewhat of a departure from if you were to refer to the Vermont vernacular, but just based on the way we're trying to designed the building around this idea of terracing up the hill. That's sort of what was driving those flat roofs. But it's basically, we have an internal drain at the center that will be draining inside the building and out, that catches all the water that's flowing into it, as opposed to draining out and then off the edge of the building, because then you need like gutters and downspouts and everything.
And the other thing that does is it creates the opportunity to have the outdoor space on the roof. From an engineering standpoint, we have a gymnasium that's flat roof, and we have a mountain campus that's also essentially a flat roof that carries the load. So I guess I'm counting on our engineering and design team to make sure the building is going to stand up and withstand the snow load. But the benefit I think is tremendous in terms of that outdoor space that's looking down on the courtyard, looking across to the bell tower, and also keeping it from having a roof that's then blocking out potentially the view of the mountain from the courtyard.
That was a big thing.
Yeah.
Or we could just make the students shovel the snow. You know?
Yeah, Alan?
I want to say I think it's a stunning design,
Thank you.
quite unusual. And I also had that question about the flat roofs, because I think we are used to thinking that. But had you considered doing a green roof that would work as an insulator as well as a cooling element?
We have been pushing green roof as much as we can. It's just the cost of it has been kind of a challenge. I think, do you want to speak to the green roof?
I'm just laughing, Ellen, because if Kyle had his way, the whole thing would be green roof.
Yeah. It would,
And the challenge is that a green roof costs about $30 a square foot. I'm coming right out at 5:45 or 5:40. I was in a meeting with our architecture team and our construction team, and we were just talking about the green roof, and the number is $30 a square foot. And a regular roof costs about nothing compared to that. So it's a $30 upcharge. So what we're wrestling with, quite frankly, is what we can afford to do within the context of budget as well as kind of design utility. So which things do we want to keep that we love, and which things do we have to let go that we love? So I'm not sure where we're going to end up on the green roof. Yes, Len?
How does this relate to potential student populations?
In what way?
Are you at capacity currently?
Well, we're essentially at capacity currently.
And does
So-
this allow you to exceed that
This would, it's more space. It's 25,000 square feet.
by order of magnitude? How much?
I think that, well, just the building itself, if you think about, we have 4 neighborhoods. In theory, probably 75 students per neighborhood. You could, that's like, in theory, that increases by 300. In actuality, in actual practice, our buildings operate somewhere in 200 to 250. The Smith Center at any given time has about 200, between 220 and 250. The Rowland is a little smaller. That typically has about 175 to 200. The seminary is about the same size as the Smith Center, and that again has between 225 and 250. So I look at this building and think in practical use, it can probably have about 200 students at any given time. That said, we expect to decommission some of our spaces. We have students in the lower level of the seminary building, and it's just not that, it's not that good a space. So net gain, yes, it expands our capacity. It's anyone's guess whether we're going to continue to grow. If we do continue to grow, we'll have space for more students. If we don't, what we have is a space that really expands our capability to teach the way we want to teach, and it's going to inform how we try to design and redesign other spaces.
Because you don't know right now how you're going to redesign the other spaces till you get this building built?
Well, we're starting down that process, because what we want to do is be able to look at, now that we know what's going into the other building, we can start to look at other spaces. For example, our access program. is a program that's located in Larson Hall, which is down on the corner of Franklin Street. It is our program for highest needs special ed students. It would be better for that program, and I think it would be better for our school, if that program were located in the heart, what is now the heart and soul of our campus. So I'd like to see us, and I'm actually committed, and I'm committed at our gala, to move that up to the heart of the campus. Where will it go? We have to determine that, and we have to look at which spaces can be best configured to support that program. My inclination is that it can go in the seminary annex in spaces that are right now being vacated with the right renovation and reconfiguration. And then we bring that program up there. That becomes, I think, a real plus for those students. And I think it becomes a real plus for our school, because that's a program that I think should be as integrated as possible into the life of the school. Yes, sir.
When are you looking to start, and how long a construction plan is it?
So we will be breaking ground probably March, April 2020. So 9 months away, which is kind of extraordinary. And you know, my mantra has been on time, on budget, on quality. On time, I don't care when it breaks ground, but I need it done by June 1st, 2021. So break ground in April and done the following June, 14-month construction cycle. Our experts say that that's manageable. Our construction firm says that that's manageable, but we have to hit all of our milestones. So 2 years from now, you know, for those of you who have kids in the audience, we're going to have this interesting learning center and courtyard. Yes?
Speaking as somebody with kids here, I cannot thank everyone enough. We've just moved here from Clifton Park, New York. The girls are in a class right now where there's over 1,000 kids in each one of their classes at Shenandoah. So it's just to take into context what's being done here, and my son is part of the special needs program already on campus. What you are doing is just tremendous and speaks to so much about what drew us here to this area. So thank you. And my question is, what do you need from the community to help support this?
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you just said. You know, I'm happy to tell you we don't need money. You know, Barry Money gave us $20 million. You know, I guess what I would like is what you just gave. I'd like your support. I'd like all of you to understand that our vision of 21st century education involves people. It's a human endeavor. It involves relationships. I think education, first and foremost, is a matter of the heart. You'll see that on that 21st century education list, nowhere did it say technology. We're not trying to become an online school. I don't want to become an online school. I want to use technology in the smartest way possible, as long as it enhances learning and enhances our relationships. If it starts to interfere with relationships, then to me it diminishes motivation and it diminishes the experience of learning. So I guess part of what I hope to convey to you this evening is that commitment, that long-term commitment that Burton is here to serve our communities, and our communities are made of people like you. And each one of your kids, each of whom is different, needs to be served and deserves to be served really, really well. So I will talk big, I will set high expectations in your mind, and then I want your support to help us achieve those expectations. That's about what I need right now. Okay? Thank you. Any other questions?
I had a couple questions. Can you put the slide back on that is the view of the building?
Sure.
Yeah.
Was there a certain view you were thinking of?
Questions.
Here, you try that.
Was there a certain view you were thinking about?
Just like the main,
Okay.
like your main elevation. Yeah, so that. So there's couple questions. What's the purpose of like the wing walls that are off on each end that extend out? Is that a design element, or is that some kind of function to wind, or like privacy, or?
It's a few things. I think at a functional level, we do have, like, we want to be taking advantage of south light as much as we can. So at least on the south part of the building, some of these roofs do extend out a little bit, and those wing walls kind of catch the roof as it's coming out, so it forms somewhat of a shaded space if there was a class or a few students that wanted to go out there. It's also helping to, like, the whole building is basically expressed as this series of ribbons, so as we extend those walls a little bit, it helps to kind of anchor the building into the hill more. They sort of splay out as they go back into the hill, and we're using those lines to be doing some landscaping around that too. So it's a functional thing, but it is somewhat aesthetic in that just the way the building is sort of integrated in with the site, that by continuing those walls a little bit, it helps to kind of express the end of the building that way.
So there's access to those smaller roofs as well from the classrooms?
To these? Unfortunately, no. I mean, again, as Mark said, if we could have our way, most of the roof would be occupiable, but occupiable roof is significantly more expensive, so we had to be very deliberate about where we're showing occupiable roof, and that would be that top roof terrace that I had shown on the on the top here. So we're trying to, again, just be smart about sort of consolidating what we can afford to do in that one space, but unfortunately we won't, at least for now, won't be able to make that lower roof accessible. But there will be actually on this, underneath this cantilever mass, there'll be a shaded little balcony that will be underneath that. So there will be an occupiable space on the second level right underneath. If I can get my cursor back. Is that showing up on this? Yeah.
Right there.
Right here. So we'll have one occupiable roof here and then a larger one up on the third level.
And then access, like obviously there's access on the lower level. What happens on the upper level? Like who is accessing that building? And is it kids that are parking above? Are they coming into their classrooms from above?
Right,
or do
so
they have to come around down?
There will be access on the top, yeah. So right now, based on the way the campus is laid out, if I can just get back to, there is an entrance over here to the left of the building. This image got cropped down a little bit, but there will be direct access from the field into that center space that we had shown. And right now that is, I mean, mostly parking is what's up there, but I think we've all talked, we've had big dreams about, there could be future buildings up there at some point that could create another hub on the campus that we want to be mindful of creating that connection to that space now. But at least in the short term, it will be primarily, students who are either parking up there or if there's athletic events going on up on the upper fields that people need to be coming down into the building from. So does that answer what you're asking?
Yeah,
okay,
I guess,
okay.
yeah.
Good.
And so you'd keep that as an athletic field or just as another sort of quad area that the kids would walk through?
So Mark maybe better speak to this, but I think the thinking now is, go ahead.
Well,
It's fine.
right now it has to be an athletic field
Yeah.
from our standpoint. I mean, we're running out of, we're using every field we have. So Dave Maselli will throw a fit, our athletic director, if we turn this into anything else. So until we figure out a longer term solution to athletics, we need this to be it's our field hockey field right now. And now field hockey loves playing with the turf, but it's turning more and more into a practice field, but still we need it as a practice field. So right now we don't have any plan beyond everything you saw, which has been, which is a lot.
And then on the side, as you come around, like right now, you can still come around that side to access that field?
The back.
Is that
you're
still
talking
going to
about.
stay open?
Yeah, there'll still be an access drive that will be behind the building, based on, because maintenance building will be moving, and we still have to create that connection up to the top on that side. So our building doesn't meet the forest on the north directly. There's a little bit of a setback in order to create that access on the back of it.
The parking lots are still in question then because there's no, if you park in that lot up there where the kids park, they have to go all the way around or down that little area to get
To access the top you're talking about, here?
There's a parking lot, the upper parking lot is about there.
Right.
Yeah.
Somewhere over here, they'll be able to walk right in and go into that building.
Right, so they'll come down through into
Or there's the ramp that, you know, that if they don't have to go to this building, presumably they would walk right down the ramp to the seminary building or the Smith Center or the Rowland Center.
Yeah, all the circulation up to the junior parking lot will remain while
When
this
do
is
you
here.
expect to be starting to work on the quad and moving the parking lots the way you have proposed?
We're still, I'm not sure. We're still waiting on the bid package to know when they can start. I think there's some permitting we still need to do. I don't know if Adam is still here. You still here, Adam?
I am still here.
So we still need some additional permitting?
We have a permit from the village to construct the lower parking,
Yep.
the lower parking lot. We, I think, recently received our stormwater permits from the state.
Yep.
And we're working with Act 250 to finalize that last permit.
Right. So probably, I mean, we know groundbreaking is going to be, let's say, April 2020. And once we start doing that work, we need to move at least some of the parking down below. So
there's a year.
sometime in the next 12 months, we're going to be working on that. I think it could be as soon as this fall, and it could be as late as early spring. But we haven't nailed that down just yet. Okay. Any other questions? I know this was billed as 1 hour and we're over an hour, so if you feel like you need to leave, you should feel like you can leave.
Do you anticipate that the population of the school will continue to grow by incrementally by how much more?
I don't know. And, you know, it's almost impossible to predict. You know, we were, so I've been here, this is my 12th year at Burton. I had the great fortune of coming here in the first place. But if you remember what happened in 2008, 2009, we had a recession. And the population of the school dropped by 100 students in the course of 2 years. So we went down, we've gone down, we've gone up. You know, if you look at the history of the school, it goes down and goes up. The demographics of Vermont say that we should be shrinking, but we're not. You know, I think we're just about the only school in Vermont that continues to grow, in part because, you know, people are attracted to this area for all kinds of reasons. You know, I think including the fact that Burton is, you know, regarded as a pretty good place to move for a family. So I don't know how to predict it. And what I say to the Board of Trustees is that I'm prepared to manage the school through growth or through decline. And part of this was a question I was asked when we started talking, before the Rowlands had even committed the money. You know, Barry was on the board, and he's saying, what are you going to do if you don't grow? The building is not built on the premise of growth. This building is designed on the premise of expanding our educational capability. I said, so no matter what, I'm promising you we will be delighted that this new building brings new capability to our teaching and informs teaching throughout the school. If we grow, we have the space to grow without doing crazy things that we would have to do if we grew without it. But if we don't grow, I think we can continue to be a fantastic school at our current size or even, you know, smaller.
So you don't have plans to continue to expand the exchange, the foreign student population?
Yeah, our foreign students, you know, we have international students. We have about 60 year in and year out. And you know, that's about where we've been. We've said, you know, somewhere around 10% of our population is about right. But there's no interest, and you know, our goal is not to use the international program to grow the school. The international program's role, and we have, for those of you who don't know, we accept students from all over the world. You know, we have students from Spain and Germany and South America and China and Korea and Japan. And what they do, you know, we're a pretty landlocked small town. And what those students do is bring a global perspective and a global sensibility to our school. They add diversity that I think is really important. That's how we've always looked at it, is we want those students to enhance the education for all of our students. And we don't want to become a school that's so committed to international students that, you know, we're now neglecting the local population because we're trying to fill up a dorm. We actually looked at and analyzed the notion of building a dormitory, you know, a large dormitory, you know, 50, 75, 100 students, to really become a small boarding school. And I'm happy to say we rejected that. You know, we looked at it, we analyzed it, and we determined that that wasn't our best way of serving our communities. And so I guess that's a long way of saying, no, I don't envision us growing the international student population as a means of growing the school.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. And
thank you so much.
You know, before you leave, if you don't mind, can we ask Tim and Jesse to stand up?
I was going to say, I want to...
Tim is a partner
team
at ZGF, and Jesse is going to be a partner at ZGF. So if you two would stand up so we can salute you as phenomenal. And in back, we've got Adam and Rafe, who are with SE Group, who's our landscape architects. And really
I do want to emphasize this really has been very much a collaborative process. You know, it's been amazing to work with you all, so thank you so much.
So, thank you all for coming. Here it is.